Okay, good morning, everyone. We'll commence our session today. Peace be upon you all. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to today's session. Thank you so much for giving us your Saturday morning to, join a very important conversation during a very dire climate, And we're really looking forward to unpacking an important resource that we've put together today. My name is Ziad, and I'll be hosting and part presenting today's session alongside fellow panelists, Dr. Yasir, Ola Al Hassan, and Basma Kahil. So by background, I'm actually a high school teacher, currently working in the mental health and suicide prevention space. And I'm also one of the project coordinators of the Shifa project, which we'll talk about very, very shortly. Just a bit of background about fellow panelists. Ola is a qualified social worker with over 20 years of experience working with families and youth and individuals in the non-government sector and the government sector also. Basma is a registered psychologist with a bachelor's degree in social science and a graduate diploma in psychology. Dr. Yasser has completed his master's and doctorates from the Health Sciences faculty at the University of Sydney and is a registered mental health nurse and occupational therapist working in the mental health space. They're very brief bios, but just to give you guys a bit of a context as to the panelists today. I also want to extend an acknowledgement of country. I want to start off today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which we're all zooming in today. I'm zooming in from the land of the Darug people, and we acknowledge not just the Indigenous peoples of Australia, but Indigenous peoples from across the world, including and in particular those in occupied Palestine, who, similar to the Indigenous people of our land, have had their land stolen and are undergoing immense persecution as we speak. So this photo I've put, it's a quite personal photo as a Palestinian myself from Akka, so in parts of occupied Palestine. This resonates a lot, and the accompanying quote also, that there's no greater sorrow on earth than the loss of one's native land. So yeah, I guess just wanted to acknowledge any fellow Palestinians here. I also wanted to acknowledge anyone that is Indigenous that is joining in today. And we hope that today's conversation is going to be fruitful and one that we, step in. We come in as broken as we might be feeling, but also kind of using it as a source of connection and inspiration from our fellow participants and also our presenters today. Okay. And just in saying that, it's been a very heavy few days, in particular with what's going on, in the legal world of the International Court of Justice, and I just wanted to put that out there that some of us might be feeling a little heavy, but I guess remember today that it's not leaving those feelings at the door; it's bringing them into this space so that we can, promote healing for ourselves and the communities and individuals that we work with. Feel free to jot down in the chat box the land you're zooming in from today. And also at the request of some of the speakers, if you can maybe just write down your name and your background, your mental health background. Yeah, and perhaps even if you work in a particular space, feel free to jot that down just so we can kind of promote familiarity with who's here. And we want this to be a space where beyond today we stay connected with everything that we're doing. We're all doing. I acknowledge that there's so much amazing work happening currently. We definitely want to be able to synergize and collaborate our efforts beyond today. Okay. I guess in extension to acknowledgement, we also acknowledge that, point out that today, as we come together as communities, we seek inspiration from Indigenous perspectives on ways of being, and when we're talking about social and emotional well-being. And for me personally, as a Palestinian, as a Muslim as well, I seek inspiration from the social and emotional well-being wheel, which I'm sure many of us are familiar with, that has been produced and is used in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. And on the right-hand side as well, We acknowledge that there's the Islamic model of the soul, which is an emerging space in the field of Islamic psychology, and acknowledging other indigenous well-being worldviews that we bring today. So how did Shifa project come about? Just a bit of context. It is a project that was launched in response to what was happening in Gaza in October. And we know the word Shifa, for some of us that might be Arabic speaking, means healing. And we wanted, that was a special word, not just for people healing in Gaza, in Palestine, and around the world, but we wanted it to symbolize the Shifa Hospital, which is one of the biggest hospitals in Gaza. And we know the healthcare system has been, under attack by the Israeli occupation forces and the Israeli government. But we wanted the project to be symbolic of healing, and wanted that to kind of be connected to what's happening in Palestine and in Gaza. So it was launched by a bunch of different organizations and individuals, and we've kind of put out our mission to promote psychological, spiritual, and community healing during this current climate through resources, events, and different aspects around, different aspects of our community healing. All right. Just a kind reminder before I pass on to Dr. Yazid and fellow panelists. I think we don't need an introduction to this, but a kind reminder also to look after ourselves. If at any point today you need to seek support or debrief, etc., then please do so. Access your own sources of support. But we're also here as well if you wanted to stay back after the session to have a yarn. Just putting it out there too. For you guys, but this is just a bit of an outline of today, talking about the current climate, the global crisis we're facing, and just unpacking a little bit about community and historical trauma in the context of Palestine, inspired from our session with Dr. Samah, but then kind of translating all that into what are the practical implications around conducting healing circles. And both Ola and Basma have been at the forefront of facilitating these circles in the last few months. So we're going to be hearing about, what are some practical tools, and then unpacking the toolkit just a little bit that we're all going to be able to access post this session. Awesome. So I guess the why we're here, I like starting off with a bit of a quote. You can take a read for it yourself. But I guess at the core of why we're all here today, and we understand that what we're going through is not just an individual experience, but a whole community experience. And that we don't just heal and cope in isolation, but in community. And for the first time, we know we're watching an active genocide, not just by reading of it in a textbook or through facts and text. We're actually, unfortunately, having to live it vicariously through audio and through videos, and that in and of itself provides many different challenges. So just wanted to kind of set the scene a little bit today and really anchor us in that point. And also, for many of us, this idea of community, we know for the majority of Gazans who belong to and the global Muslim community, there's a deeper kind of connection, and we know that is the connection of faith. And the impact that is being felt right across the globe sits at the core of our faith tradition in the Muslim community, which talks about this idea of a global community, or the word ummah. And the Prophet Muhammad talks about the connection of community, that if the Muslim community is like one body, if one part of it aches, then the rest of it aches. So these are really, really important concepts to be able to acknowledge, when we're talking about why we're feeling certain ways or how strongly we're feeling connected to others. All right, so this is the toolkit, which we've put together as a collaborative process around conducting healing circles and support circles. Everyone will have access to this post this session, the most recent version of it. And I guess what we wanted to do was to centralize all the information around how to conduct healing circles and feel equipped and empowered doing so in a really streamlined process with the limited resources that we have. So we'll talk to this a little bit later on. But I guess I wanted to open up the opportunity to everyone here, just a bit of a discussion. We've explored a little bit about why we need to be speaking about healing, coping, and well-being in this current climate. But curious to know also, and to hear from everybody, whether it's through chat or if you're comfortable enough to unmute, why you think we need to be speaking about healing, coping, and well-being according to the different interactions you've had within your community. Anyone like to share?
I can make a comment. I thank you very much, Ziad, for your wonderful introduction. I think that as a recently practicing social worker in the perinatal space, we have some clients who have accessed our service who have been very distressed by what's happening in Gaza, and it has affected their parenting capacity, because that's the focus of our service. And so I think that it's perfectly normal that distressing events like this would have an impact on us, but especially from this perspective of the supports that we provide to people, learning about healing and coping through these difficult times can assist us to support the overall outcomes that we're working towards in the mental health space.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. We also have some responses in the chat. A lot of us are feeling the same, and so sharing our experiences to comfort each other, feeling seen and gain validation. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Thank you, Khadija, for sharing. I'll just read out the response. I believe we've been impacted by intergenerational trauma, collective trauma, historical, cultural, and racial trauma. And that's absolutely, I think we all feel that's risen to the surface in the last 100 days or so. Yeah, and mentioning that these all have different implications of harm. Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for sharing. Anyone else want to unmute and share why you think we need to be speaking about this?
I'll go. It's Zahir. So I just think, I know for myself and clients and so forth, that big feeling of guilt, having to carry on. It's like you witness a genocide unfolded beneath your eyes. There's lots of gaslighting happening, lots of abuse tactics. And it's that guilt, like, how do you eat? How do you sleep? And, I think it's quite hard to actually just shut it down completely in a genocide, but it's like about looking about how can we just still function and carry on with everything happening. And I think that's important because we do have to function. We have to work. We have kids. We have responsibilities. And yeah, I think that's why it's important to have these conversations.
Amazing. Oh, yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I think speak on behalf of the group. Thank you.
I would like to add up in this one that when we are talking about the migrant communities, a lot of people, they don't have any awareness of these like services and how important these services are. When we are talking to them about these services and how can they help them in their everyday life, that make a huge difference. Because as you said, their trauma is not just like present trauma, it's like past, intergenerational, racial, all those things. So the impact is quite significant. And we have to do a lot of work in that perspective. First of all, letting them know the services are here to listen to them and validate their feeling, and also giving them some techniques how they can function in their everyday life with that support.
Thank you so much, Rita, for sharing that. And I think we can agree that we can probably have a yarn and a discussion just around this for the next few hours. But I do appreciate everyone's contribution. And hopefully we can kind of keep that front and center as we move through today's presentation. There'll also be opportunities to open up for discussions. But I guess for the next section, I'm going to pass over to Dr. Yasir, who's going to take us through a bit of the theory around trauma, community trauma, etc. in the current context. And then we're going to transition from that, for 10, 15 minutes from that, we're going to pass over to Basma and Ola, who are going to take us through the practical aspects around facilitating healing circles. So over to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this morning. As in the introduction we said about trauma, some of you touched base about the environment now, about the intergenerational trauma, because this is particular to do with the case of Palestinian and what's happening now in Gaza. So if you have, for example, a computer, between now and then you need to do update for the system, but also update to the antivirus, because again, so this is what exactly been happening. So update to the system, update. So this is update to the trauma memory and all these happening. And so that's badly affecting people, even from older generations who've been through this trauma before. Another thing in terms of the Palestinian, and when we want to talk about post-traumatic stress. Hello? Yes. When we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, we assume there is post, which is after. But in the context of Palestine, as we're talking now, it's still an ongoing atrocity, still ongoing, trauma. So it's endless, and it's been for the last 100 days, intensifying the whole experience. Because as you know, when we come up with the definition of the trauma, it's basically threat to the personal life, or it's life-threatening, and there is kind of intense fear. Imagine these people being in this situation for the last 100 days, or even before, like we talk about the last 76 years. But again, even in the last 100 days, it's been intensifying more and more. So, and the worst thing about the trauma, because when we talk about different types of trauma, we talk about it's man-made trauma, because as we know, like there's the natural disaster versus the man-made trauma. So the worst thing about this kind of trauma, it's a man-made. So imagine that was as a result, if you're looking at these rebels, and I'm happy to share like a video about, a man looking for his family under the rebels, and he's trying to find them, like he can hear them calling out, but unfortunately he can't dig deep to rescue them. So that's just another thing that with this trauma, it's not like earthquake, it's not like a volcano, it's all about man-made. And that's what happening when it comes to the guilt feeling for many people, like they want to do something about it, but unfortunately they want to cease fire now, but there is nothing happening in this context. So again, people have developing many different things, and we are not here to pathologize this experience, but again, we need to touch base how people, because at the end of the day, they are human beings, their action and expression of these emotions different. And in some cases, as I mentioned, like we talk about the post-traumatic growth, because some people like having this opportunity, like growing out of many things that they've been doing for ages. It's like when we had that pandemic, and many people find this as an opportunity, like for them to, to wake up call, just to do things in different way, and they're still doing so. One other thing, when it comes to be healing, we're talking about the rebuild, and I always like to use the metaphor of the phoenix bird, and even we can use this as an exercise in running the circle, and it can give them like a card, they can draw that, or they have discussion about the phonics, which is basically in the Greek mythology, it's about regenerate from the ash. So this is how people want to do their life and rebuild again. And then we touch base about the trauma when it comes to the identity, because again, for many people, the trauma is part of their day life. They day in, day out, their entire life in trauma. So it's endless, and it's been like kind of lifestyle for them, because they don't know anything better or anything out of that. So if you think about someone being living in that circumstance for ages, the normal life is a trauma, war, and this is like how they've been living their life. So this is just to be brief. For those who are interested, I will share that video about the theater project we called the Black Box. So it's comparing between the man-made trauma and natural disaster, and people talking about their living experience, but again in Arabic. So once we have a subtitle for that one, and we can have the English translation for that, I'm also happy to share with you down the track. So thanks for having me, and we will have more discussion down the track.
Awesome. Thanks, Doctor. So we'll just quickly go through the next few slides, Doctor, you and I, just around the theory. So I guess just a little bit about traumatic events. You may have already kind of skimmed through what is on the slide, but I guess that behavior iceberg is a big one in the context of not just young people, but also adults. That trauma isn't just what you see, what meets the eye, it's also what sits beneath, and acknowledging those internal emotional states that might be present with individuals, but also across communities. Doctor, did you want to talk to this? This is a little bit about the historical trauma in the context of Palestine.
Yes. So as we mentioned, like with Palestinian, it's been ongoing since 1948, and people witness a lot of wars and trauma, and the occupation being there for ages in terms like occupation, under occupation, so after occupation. So that's just we had a nice session with Dr. Samah Jaber from Palestine, and she was talking about how the experience of Palestine in terms of collective trauma, and they've been generation after generation, they've been exposed to this trauma. 1948, then 1967, and during the Intifada, and in Gaza, it happened 4 times so far, and this is the last, which was happening right now. So basically, people like imagine like someone who is around 80 years old. He's been through 3 or 4 wars, and top of that, like even what you don't hear in the news, but still there's something. But now probably they're becoming more visible, and also with the social media, like you could see more and more from this one. But again, these just are the transgenerational trauma about what's been happening in Palestine.
Awesome. I think, responding to this historical / collective / community trauma, I guess our aim in doing so is to, our role is to return pre-critical incident functioning as quickly as possible, but also kind of using spaces to help through it. I think, as Dr. Yasser said, this is an ongoing trauma. It's not something that we talk about in the past. So it becomes really, really important that when we're looking at community trauma or collective trauma, we also look at collective treatment. And this is where we're going to, I guess, venture off into looking specifically in the context of healing circles and support circles as we pass on to Ola and Basma. But this is a really nice graphic that we've put together based on our session. For some of you that might not know, we held a session with Dr. Samah Jaber, who's a psychiatrist and the head of the Ministry of Health in Palestine. She resides in Jerusalem, and she gave us some deep insights, not some, but some really deep insights as to the current landscape of well-being and the psyche of what it's like living under occupation. And that's not just relevant to them, it's also relevant to Palestinians and communities living in the diaspora, so living outside of Palestine. And it was unpacking that, but then she said something really beautiful around like collective trauma or historical trauma requires collective treatment. And we kind of put this together. This summarizes this idea of, that we need to be able to process and reprocess historical and collective trauma as a community, as a collective. And she suggested that, in doing so, we obviously employ trauma-informed care across the community, not just across mental health professionals, but when we're looking at school communities, teachers, when we're looking at the health sector, looking at medical staff, people having a lens of trauma-informed practice when they're looking at these at various ways of treatment collectively. And then this is some of the stuff that she mentions around what are some community-based interventions. So holding safe spaces, open studios, expressions through art, which she really kind of unpacked. It was very fascinating for me personally to listen to. Yeah. I don't know if you wanted to add on anything to that, Doctor, before we hand over to
Yeah,
Ola.
it's part of their resistance, like even like some sewing or doing some art craft kind of things. In the Palestinian case, they use this as type of resilience and also part of their expression of identity, because again, their identity is within this. Like a good example, even the traditional dress in Palestine for each city different and based on that cultural background and its expression of their identity. Also for collective healing, because this is one of the things that they've been doing. So many of their art craft work is kind of expression their resilience, and as I said, it's basically like identity. And also when you mention about the diaspora, it's about their right of return and how they want to express their feelings. I mean, for those who've been like fled their country and forced to migrate or whatever to another land, so they express this with art and craft. And to mention like there's many ways, again, in many different places about using these technique, and I can touch base about some exercise they've been doing. So knitting, sewing, and also rosary, and like many other stuff they're using in terms of expression their identity.
Brilliant. Thanks, Doc. Over to you, Ola and Basma, to take us through the next session. I'm just mindful, feel free to kind of ask any questions. I know there's been a few questions in the chat box, but we'll definitely be touching on them and allocating a question and answers towards the back end.
Thanks, Ziad. Thanks, Dr. Yasser. Okay, so I'll be touching a little bit about circles and the sort of the 101 to starting up your own circle, and then Basma will go into a breakdown of a circle or a few circles and how we actually ran that, what they looked like. So just to give you a bit of a heads up. Okay, so healing circles are very powerful, and we know that they've got links to ancient practice that have been used across cultures to create a safe and supportive space for individuals to heal and to find inner peace. They can be traced back to indigenous cultures who understood the interconnectedness of the mind, the body, and the spirit. These cultures recognize the importance of communal support, and they created circles for individuals to come together because they knew that we are not meant to go through crisis and grief on our own, and sadness and difficulty. We are meant to deal with these things as a community and collectively. And when we run our circles, generally, whether it's with young people or adults, I always like to mention that, because I feel like, especially with young people, it gives them that buy-in when I say, our ancestors gathered this way. somebody somewhere in your motherland or homeland or your parents' homeland sat under a tree and dealt with problems and issues and hardships in this way. So I find that that gives them a little bit of a buy-in into the process. Healing circles have gained a lot of recognition and integration into modern psychology recently, with a lot of mental health professionals embracing the power of circles as a therapeutic tool to facilitate healing and growth. We know that from research, the format of the circle is also, it does promote a lot of sense of safety, trust, and connection. If you think about the way a circle is set up, there isn't a power imbalance, unlike a general traditional presentation or a workshop, or even one-to-one therapy sometimes where you're talking at the person or vice versa. Everyone's equal in that circle. Not to say that facilitators don't have some level of power coming in, we're mindful of that, but amongst the participants, there's an equal balance. No matter what you come with to the circle, you're all equal. The purpose of the healing circle remains really as relevant today as it was in ancient times. I think it's even more relevant as we move into these really individualistic sort of mind frames and capacities, and we're so busy and becoming very disconnected. We need these circles now more than ever, so that we can learn from each other and to learn from one another's wisdom. As somebody asked, I think it was Frankie in one of the chats, the shared knowledges and skills. We all have ways that we are coping and surviving, and sometimes we don't realize them until they're verbalized and we speak about them openly, or that somebody else receives them in a very positive way. So by seeing how other people tackle problems or hardships or just difficulties in general, and how they make positive changes, you can discover a whole range of strategies for facing your own emotions and hardships. And we saw that happening in the circle when we ran them recently. Basmara and I, there was a participant who was sharing something so it just flowed off her mouth, lips, as though it was just something that she didn't even, it was like a taken for granted skill and knowledge that she had. And then when she saw that everybody in the group, it was resonating with them, she felt a real immense sense of pride and happiness about that her I guess skill or ways of going about her life have offered other people solace. And we saw other participants saying, thank you for sharing that. That really resonated with me. I think that's something I want to now do. And afterwards, when we were conversing over the painting, she said, I didn't realize, like, this is something I do every day, and I didn't realize how important and powerful it was. But seeing other people's reactions, I'm glad that I've been able to contribute in that way. So obviously that's also enriched her and made her realize the innate skills and values that she brings from her culture and just life experiences. Okay, so now that we've spoken about the sort of the why circles are really important, we're going to go into the guidelines to setting up a circle. And I think this is where I would really like to mention two very important things. It's important to think about whether you'll be holding a circle on your own or with another person. Now, healing circles provide the safest experience, in my opinion, and also there's a lot of information out there and research to sort of back this. It provides the safest experience for its members when there are two people supporting the circle. It's also more fun and more fulfilling to work as a team with somebody. The load is lighter and the learning is much deeper. I know that I thrive by working with other people, and I really enjoy, and I feel that I'm a better social worker for the feedback I've received from co-facilitators over the years. And this is where your colleague, whoever you deliver this with, could give you feedback on your, maybe not just yourself, but also collectively how the group went. You can use this opportunity to debrief, to change your content and to maybe fix things up if it wasn't working, but also offer that really important reflection that we know in our field as mental health professionals. Reflective practice is so important, okay? And also, I just want to give an example of when having two facilitators really, I realized how important it was. I was running a group with a young people years ago, and it was a young people talking about a very heavy topic around carers. They were carers for a loved one with a mental health issue. And as young person shared their story, this triggered something for another young person, and they left the group in a very distressed way. And if there was not two of us, I don't know how we could have really managed this, because you can't leave that person who's distressed. I don't know what would have happened had they left the circle to them physically and emotionally. Their safety would be a concern for me. But also, if I leave the circle, who would ensure the remaining group's safety, emotional and physical? And it's really important, because this can happen and it can come up. And you know, it also just allows for your own well-being. So somebody also asked in the group, how do we look after ourselves? This is one way to look after yourself and to sustain the work that you're doing, so you can keep doing it. And by putting in these measures to ensure that you are also emotionally safe and not burning out and not distressed after a circle, because it can have that impact on you. Now, I've been asked in the past, and most recently, would I recommend somebody who's not of a mental health professional background to actually run a circle? I'd like to mention that really it is important that you do ensure that if you're not a qualified mental health professional, then it's crucial you co-facilitate with a mental health professional to ensure the group's safety. Having a mental health professional in the group can provide you with support and intervention, like the scenario I just gave where a young person stormed off, and to provide individualized support and intervention also. This doesn't mean you can't lead the circle. You can, if that's something you want to do, but just being mindful of having somebody else there to step in with that professional background. And there are a lot of people that would be willing to do that and to volunteer or to work with you, or this is their space. So reach out to your community, find those networks, and ensure your safety and that of your participants, because we do have a duty of care when people come to our circles. Okay, so I'll move now. Just mindful. Oh, yeah, okay with time. So you've sorted out the other two things, very important factors. Now you're trying to figure out where you're going to run the circle. So select a comfortable and tranquil space to hold your circle, like Basma and I did. We were really fortunate to run it at the beach a few times, and then again at Homebush Park. But I know that's not always practical, and sometimes in the organizations we work with and risk factors and all that, we have to maybe hold them in a closed setting or a work setting. So there's some things you can do to make that space a little bit more peaceful and inviting. So just be mindful of your lighting, your seating arrangements, ambience. Think about ways you can create ambience. I've seen this done in a room in an organization where they just laid a mat on the ground, and they had some cushions, and then just turned down the light if they could, or they just played around with some of the lighting. Maybe they had the lighting coming in from another room, so that it wasn't direct fluorescent lighting in that room. Just things that you can play around with. Now, when we start a circle, I always like to establish and define the purpose and intention of the circle. And I like to say that at the beginning of a circle, so that people know what's the purpose. So if this is a one-off circle, I think it's really important to mention that this doesn't replace ongoing therapeutic support. And this is more of a space where people come together to unpack, debrief, and find peace and comfort in the space of others. But just being mindful of that. Okay. Now, creating a safe and non-judgmental space is really important. And how we do this is by really coming up with some guidelines for sharing. I always recommend that people come to the circle with at least 2, you can call them group understandings, that they have in mind. Some of the ones I like to use, especially with young people, is I ask them to think about if what I'm about to say, is this going to divide or unite the group? And if it's going to divide the group, maybe it's not something that needs to be shared here. So I find that's a really good example, a non-confronting way of leading the group to creating a safe space. And then, of course, talking about confidentiality, that's really important. And then another one we like to add, Basma and I use this also, was ask people to refrain from interrupting and offering unsolicited advice. So if people want to share, and I give this example and I say, from my experience, I found that this really helped me. So that's just some things. But anyway, once you've done that, write these up. So usually one person's guiding the group to come up with these agreements or group understandings, and another person's writing them and then putting them at the front of the group. So you can have them on a board or stick them up. And this is really good because it keeps it at the forefront of people's minds. Now, you also need to be mindful that this does not turn into a counseling session for one person, which can happen. And I understand, and I want to acknowledge a lot of people, this might be the first time they're coming to a circle or any type of sort of healing space. And it's the first time they're unloading and unpacking. So you can gently lead the participants back to the intended purpose of the group. And again, this is where it really helps to have 2 participants present. And you can do this gently by just saying to somebody, I really like what you're talking about. I'm really interested and keen to learn a little bit more about this. Do you mind if we continue the conversation after the group? So then it hasn't made them feel like, they need to be silenced or you're interrupting them in a negative way, but you're gently doing it. And I'm sure you've all got your own styles and ways of doing that. So I'd love to hear how other people do it also. Now, beginning with the opening ceremony, I think it's very important to have a ritual that begins the ceremony, the circle, and ends the circle. These are really crucial, I think, and they've contributed, I believe, to the success of a lot of circles. And this could be saying a prayer in whatever faith or language that works for you, a dua, which is also a prayer, Quran recitation, which we know now listening to Quran has the potential to release endorphins by stimulating brainwaves. Lighting a candle, that could be just, it's a symbolic ritual that says we're starting something, we're coming into the circle. And another one is bahura, which is also incense. And that's also a nice way to start the circle. You can do drumming, you can do, I know in the toolkit, there's going to be a list of ideas and suggestions. So refer to that for some extra advice. And sorry, I don't know if anybody can hear my kid in the background. Sorry. Anyway, so yeah, be mindful of the bahura. We recently tried to set one up and participant mentioned to us that she has asthma, so we had to ditch that idea. So just be careful, check in with your participants before you light one up. Now, providing a closing ceremony, this is also very important to end the circle. And again, you can do one of the few things that we mentioned earlier. One of the recent circles that Basma and I ran, we didn't have, we had somebody recite a dua, so a prayer at the end, a collective dua where everybody said Amin, which also brings everybody's involvement into the circle and they feel like they're part of it. But we didn't have one at the last circle, so we asked the participants to go around and say something, and a few people volunteered, and that was a nice way to also end that. You can also do gratitude cards or positive affirmation cards. You can do a mindfulness activity, a breathing activity, or you can do skills and values cards, which is also a great activity. And I'll talk a little bit about this when Basma gets to her section on how we actually did this. But you can lay these cards out and participants can select a card that gives them hope, that resonates with them. And each participant speaks for no more than a minute or 30 seconds on about an image and how they're holding on to hope. And that's just a nice way to end the group. Also mention and offer people counseling and support. Ziad put up a slide earlier that had some great services. There's also some phone lines that people can call, but this is really important for people needing that more deeper emotional support beyond the group, especially if it's a one-off group and it's not a recurring therapeutic group. And I'd like to add to the services that Ziad mentioned, the support directory.au is made up of culturally relevant services and therapists, counselors, and mental health professionals that clients or individuals can go into to find a counsellor or therapist in New South Wales, but there is some Victoria-based services. If you are running a circle and you would like to give out a card about this service, we have created some little slides, not slides, like short pieces of slides that we give out. And Basma and I at our last circle handed that out to everybody just to keep it at the forefront of their mind in the event that they needed that extra support. So we've done the ensuring people's safety emotional safety after they leave our group. Setting up debriefing. This is a must. I really believe that debriefing is essential when you're running a healing circle. It's important to have a debriefing session set up after. And again, this is when having 2 participants really comes in handy. And this provides support, perspective, and opportunities for growth. It's an opportunity for you and your colleague to reflect on the circle, what worked, what didn't work, what was effective, what concerns you might have. If you've got details of participants that attended, maybe there's somebody you're concerned about, you can do some just touching in with them and following up. And circles can be really emotionally exhausting sometimes, not all the time. They are very fun at the same time also, and very fulfilling, and you get something out of these circles, but there can be an element of emotional exhaustion. And so what the debriefing session offers facilitators is to ensure that their self-care is looked after, and it serves as an effective process for reflective practice. Remember, these are just guides. They're not set in stone. These are just some of the ways that we have been running circles. You can adapt them to best suit your experience and expertise and the unique needs and dynamics of your clients and the group that you're working with. I'd really love to hear from people who go on to run a circle after today, especially if today's their first time. Let us know how you run any additional activities you do, rituals for setting up the circle or ending up the circle that are different to what we've mentioned today. We'd love to add that to our own resources and skills and ideas for next circles. So look forward to hearing from you guys. I'll hand over now to Basma.
Yep. Thank you, Ada. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, it's been good. All right. Do I have access? Oh, there it is. Is Ziad pressing the buttons? I believe Ziad's pressing the buttons. Okay, never mind.
Yes, yes. You just give me a heads up.
No worries. Thank you so much. So yes, as Ada mentioned, we've had the opportunity to run 3 different types of healing circles over the past couple of months. It's been a very, very beautiful and enlightening experience, and been very grateful to share space with so many beautiful people. So I'll be kind of going over the practicalities of the stuff that Ola mentioned. It won't be in specific order to her circle, but as I'm talking about what we did, you kind of pick up where things sat in that in the process of it. So I think the first thing that you need to kind of establish is that pre-circle setup. It's really, really important to set out your intentions and your goals for the circle, only because you use them as a guide to come back to. Because even though, when we look at circles, we think, oh, it's so fun, it's so nice, people just come and talk, but there's a lot of things that have to happen in that background. So having those intentions there, it really helps you define the nature of the circle. So, what it is and what it isn't. So it could be, for example, this is not a group therapy, this is a support circle. So just being mindful as to how much we allow, participants to delve into, I guess, their thoughts and their processes. It helps having set intentions and goals. It helps also guide the structure during the planning, and it helps keep the circle on track during the actual circle itself. And at the end, it gives us something to measure our circle up against. So if we have kind of like our little goals and our intentions, then at the end, we kind of come back and we say, all right, do we feel like we met 1, 2, and 3? And it just kind of gives us a bit more direction about future planning. The other thing that we need to do is obviously meet up with your co-facilitator if there is, hash out the plan of it, the activities, and who'll be covering what. So it's really good to kind of go into these circles with a little running sheet that you both can have, and then you just kind of go off that. We don't really go specifically into time, but it's more like, what's it called, like stages, and then you kind of have a little time in between, a time guide for each section. So the actual process of conducting the healing circle is that we held 3. 2 of them were healing or circle of support by the sea, which is where we had healing circles next to the ocean, which was really, really beautiful. And the second one was a heal and paint session where we had a healing circle followed by a guided painting session. So the intention with both of them was really to create a space that people can come together and collectively process their thoughts and their feelings so far, because often, we get so caught up in life that we don't have time to step aside and just kind of talk through what's going through, so what's going internally. So we wanted to create that space. We were conscious, that we wanted to keep it outside because we know the healing power of nature. And it really helps ground you and it helps connect you to our essence, I guess. So that was really important for us, just like Ryla was saying about the ambience and creating a vibe, if we're going to call it that. And, we also wanted to, I guess, replicate certain traditions that we have within our culture and our religion and stuff. So, we brought in food, we brought in bakhur, as Ola mentioned, which it was nice, but, also at the same time, be cautious. So, we brought in fruit, we brought in tea, cake, and ush. And it's because that is from us. We, when people come together, we need to have that. That's from our tradition. It's from our culture. We love to feed people. So we really wanted to make people feel that that sense of community. And we gather over food, and I think it's a beautiful thing. SubhanAllah. And I think, you tap into what you feel like you'd like to offer. I think if you feel like you'd like to do something and you have capacity to do it, don't shy away from it, because all of these things are what adds to the circle. So just, be confident in that. Was anything else here? No. Yeah. So good with that. So that was kind of like the pre stuff. So as for the circle structure, oops. Yes. So the actual circle process. So the way that we did it is we first opened up with a Quran recitation. And that was to kind of obviously we had our healing circles were for Muslim participants. So we thought that there's no better way to enter that space than through the words that really help connect people with who they are. So we started it with a Quran recitation. And then afterwards we did acknowledgement of country, and how we can't talk about the Palestinian cause without also acknowledging the plight of the Aboriginal and the Indigenous people, in which honestly it's literally where we're sitting. So it's really it was really, really important to acknowledge that. We thank people for showing up. And we kind of briefly explained why we wanted to conduct the healing circle. And again, we set out our intentions for the group. So again, going back to the intention, and it's just to kind of allow people to understand what to expect from the space. We also, after that, went over some disclaimers. With the disclaimers, it's very, very important to have them. Otherwise, people just it helps, I guess, create certain boundaries, which are important when you have so many different people coming in from different spaces. And you don't really know, honestly, you don't know who's going to enter that circle. So, we put out the advertisement and we say, we're holding the circle. We'd love for you guys to join if you need it. But who actually attends, we don't know. So it's important to have those disclaimers to set out what kind of expectations, I guess, between the individual and themselves. So that was stuff like, saying that, a healing circle is not a substitute for therapy. And if, you're feeling overwhelmed, that we have people here to debrief if need be afterwards. And that if to kind of look out for certain signs, if you're feeling overwhelmed by all of this and you kind of step away and after the circle. So we just noted what signs to look out for as well. So things like your functional capacity is decreasing, you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, you can't do life anymore, and that's probably a sign that you should actually book in with someone. So just kind of went over that. And we also provided them with details on where to seek support if need be. So that was the support directory that Ola mentioned earlier. And we also explained to them that it is important to process and express their thoughts and feelings, but because this isn't a group therapy per se, and it's a one-off thing, so to try and keep the emotional release at a 5 to 6 instead of an 8 to 10, which in a weird way that it sounds a bit like it defeats the purpose, but it kind of allows them to have in the back of their minds, like, okay, when I'm I'm talking about it, because they can open up any door, right? And this is such a heavy topic, and like when we're talking about intergenerational trauma, it really pulls forward all of these experiences that we've had. So it might be not even connected, but it's like to the actual circle, but it's connected to their own personal traumas in their own way. So just telling them, you know, that bring it, but keep it, cap it ish. They responded really well to that, which was nice. The other thing, like what Ola mentioned, was the group agreements, and that is to really set the tone and the expectations for the group as a whole. So, you know, we kind of asked, you know, what's needed as a group to create a safe place. So we wrote on a whiteboard and explained things, you know, such as confidentiality, like if you want to share a story, or if you're feeling inspired to omit, you know, the names, to have, you know, any details that kind of would like reveal who that person is. And you can just say, oh, I was inspired, you know, a person said 1, 2, and 3, and kind of keep it to the point instead of saying, oh, the story kind of thing. We spoke about things such as having empathy and respectful of people's differences, again, because we don't know who's coming in and there's so many different people. And as well, being responsible for our own emotions. So if we feel a bit overwhelmed, to, you know, take a step back, to go ground yourself. So we told them, like, you know, you can go, when we were next to the ocean, we're like, you know, go do some grounding in the water, put your feet in the water, you know, touch the sand, touch the earth, just take some deep breaths. So we kind of explained to them what to do if they were feeling overwhelmed. So as you can see, we haven't even gotten to the actual circle yet, like the actual healing part or the processing part, but all of this is so important to establish the context of the circle. So these things, you know, we might feel like, let's get into it, but you need to set a foundation that you can kind of work off before that. So yes, so then we got into the actual circle part. It's all circle part, but the healing part, I guess. And that's kind of like where we had our group introduction. So that was an icebreaker. We went around, everyone said their name and the history of their name, which is actually such an interesting activity. Some people have like these beautiful stories, and other ones are like, so my mom had a C-section and they named me and she recovered, and I get it. So really, really interesting, I guess, icebreaker. And, you know, why we also asked them to kind of describe very briefly why they felt like they needed to come into the healing circle. And then we kind of gave a little introduction about setting the scenes, and then, you know, acknowledging that our collective thoughts, our feelings, and our rage. We validated some of the symptoms that we might be experiencing. So like the restlessness, the fatigue, the irritation. And we also validated, and I think this is something that many of us, especially in Western countries, experience. So we really validated the idea that it's okay to be centering ourselves in order to keep going, because we know that for many of us, there's a lot of guilt involved in actually having the privilege to, you know, the privilege of safety and security, to be able to be sitting in such a beautiful space. And that, for a lot of people, that felt very, very uncomfortable for them. So we had to address that, I guess, you know, that it's okay to kind of to be in that space, because, you know, we are going through that collective trauma. So we need to collectively come together to process and heal. And even though it might, you know, look and feel selfish, this is how healing looks for us in our particular context. So the fact that we have that, you know, I guess we didn't choose for that, but that is something that we have. So we want to tune into that or lean into that in order to help others, kind of thing. So I guess just validating that. And that really gave a lot of people permission to kind of, I guess, you know, open up, and gave themselves permission to be like, hey, you know what, it is what it is. So let's kind of let's do that. So that was the kind of that part. And then after that, we moved into the first activity. And the first activity was the to process their thoughts and their emotions so far. So what we did was, if you have a look, so it was kind of the MetaFox, those cards. So those are the ones that we used. I think I purchased that from Amazon a while back. There were two, I just mixed them together, but you can go off the original. The original works fine. And you don't have to use all the images. You can sift through them and kind of choose what you, don't get rid of all of them, because you never know what people connect to. But if there are certain images where you feel like that's not going to work, then it's okay. It's up to you. so yeah, so we scattered those images around on the floor, and then we asked participants to take a moment to choose a card that spoke to them about their current state, their current struggle, and their experience. We gave them a couple of minutes to kind of go around and choose one. And then after they've had some time to reflect, we went around the circle, and each person described the card and why they felt like connected to it. And it's always so interesting, because the cards are just so like, they're just there open, and you just place them, and you never know who will pick what, and you never know who will connect to what part of that image. So it's such a powerful tool, because it really gives insight into the internal kind of processing of that person, and it gives them space to kind of explore what's happening inside. So as this was happening, as each participant was going through their talking about their thing, we gave each person like around a minute to kind of talk about their thing, or their image, sorry. Then at me and Isla, we kind of asked a reflective question to get them thinking a little bit more. And I feel like there's a bit no right or wrong if you do want to do this. For some people, for some people, they're okay to just allow them to describe what they're experiencing, and they can leave it at that. But we found that, asking them like a little reflective question allows space to go a little bit deeper into the image, or into the processing of that. I'm thinking that's it. Yes. And then after that, we did a little stretch, because we had a little break in between. It was just like a get up and stretch, because everyone was sitting down. And then the second part was the ways that we can hold out onto hope, and that's kind of where Ola came in and discussed and used her cards, which was really good. So why we did that was because we wanted to talk about the actual processing of things, and then we didn't want to leave them leave them like that. So we needed to bring in ways to hold out onto hope, which inshallah will be touching a little bit more on how she used her cards. And then that was kind of like the main two sections of it, and then we finally wrapped it up the way that we did that. So there were two, depending on the circles. The circles by the sea, we kind of did a guided meditation afterwards, and it was really beautiful, because we connected it to the ocean and the trees and stuff that were around us. And then we made a dua, which is a prayer for Palestine and for the for everyone in general. And then the heal and paint, we wrapped it up with the painting session, which was beautiful, because it kind of allowed people to continue the processing, but in an indirect way. So as they were painting, they were like, their mind was preoccupied in the thing, and their conversations were still happening in between, which was really nice. And yes, also what we did, which we in the image with the little watermelon and the thing on top, the quote on top, yes, thank you. What that was, we collected number 10. So as Ola was talking about her as the participants were going through and kind of discussing the ways that they held on to hope, I collected their thoughts. I wrote them down in notes, and then we sent it to participants afterwards in a letter. So the ways that each person kind of, shows resilience and shows resistance. So that was a really nice takeaway message. And then what we did was, in the Heal and Paint, we actually printed out previous participants' quotes, and then we gave it to them with details of the directory. Sorry. And Arla, did you want to jump in about your?
Yeah. Thanks, Basma. And I think somebody already asked a question about how we carry on those skills and shared knowledges. And I think the letter was a really nice way of doing that. So we wrote back to participants with what Basma mentioned. We called them special knowledges, skills, and values. And that was really nice, because it's a reminder that we are, yes, with every story of trauma, there is a story beside that story of trauma of something positive and something strong that's built in strength and skills and values that we are all holding on to. We're not passive in our struggles, and that we are all doing something small or large every single day to get through the day. And what this does, it brings it to the surface. It's a form of narrative therapy. So if anybody's interested in it, we can send you some resources later on about it. but it's proven to be a very effective tool and very healing for people. The skills and values cards that we mentioned, we use, they're actually born out of a project from working with young people in Western Sydney. The reason why I love them is because they are born from our community, from our young people, who then collated this set of cards that have gone around the world. They're being used in Australia with different groups and contexts, but also all over other countries in the UK, the US, the Middle East, across the Middle East. So they're incredible in that way, because we also mention that we say these are cards from our community, our youth, and I feel that it enhances the connection with the cards. But you can get the cards on the Dalwish Centre website if you want to, and yeah, so I know that they've got some there, and all proceeds go back into reprinting those cards. But it's a nice way to also honor our young people, and this is part of their legacy, and they're beautiful. But also at the back of the cards, they have these great questions that you can lean in on. So if you're a bit stuck on what you can ask, there's some tools and resources there for you.
Ola, just a heads up, I put the link in the chat to those
Thank
ones as
you.
well. And the
Thank you.
MetaFox ones too, Basma.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Awesome. Not sure if you wanted to, I'll just kind of talk to this slide a little bit. I've just collated a few of the different events that have promoted this idea of a healing circle. I guess in extension to both Ola and Basma, which you guys brilliantly kind of outlined, you know, your experiences and how we can go about structuring. But there's also Hawiyati, another organization that focuses on running Palestinian healing circles. They're also a contributor to the toolkit. So when we do forward it, it's going to also include some resources that hit closer to home from a Palestinian cultural perspective also. Just before I open up to questions, the toolkit in and of itself is a toolkit. It's a PDF copy. We've kind of tried to collate it in a way that it's a one-stop shop where you're able to feel empowered and upskill yourself using the CISD, or the Critical Incident Stress Debriefing model. So there's a free upskill video that's included. There's some theories and some background information. There's the guidelines and some steps to consider when conducting your support circles, as well as some suggested scripts. A lot of what Ola and Basma both presented today will be included in the toolkit. It's not the be-all or end-all, definitely not. These are just suggestions that we've collated with the resources and experiences that we have. But beyond just the toolkit, and this is what I wanted to talk to very importantly with everyone here, is you know, actually bringing this to life. So we really want to encourage everybody. We're still trying to figure out how we're going to do this, but we want to be able to hold space, you know, these type of spaces across the country, but also kind of be linked in together. It's amazing that everyone's doing this in silo, sorry, but it'd be great if we can kind of network together. So what we've done is this QR code here. If you want to scan it, we've set up a bit of a WhatsApp group just for healing circle facilitators. So we want to use this space to lean on one another in supporting either pre, during, or post, and then also use it as a space that if somebody does need to debrief, they can reach out to a few of us in the group for that extra support. And in saying that, I do also want to acknowledge that this has been an amazing collaborative piece of work, both today's presentation, but also beyond that with the toolkit formation itself. And we'll definitely be sending a bit of a summary after today, sometime early next week, with a link to the finished toolkit, as well as links to kind of stay connected with one another. I just wanted to pass over to you. I'm going to stop sharing. I am conscious today is protest day also, so some of us might need to be logging off soon. So just sticking within the time frame and opening it up to everybody to ask any questions, share any thoughts, any queries, concerns. Feel free to also put your videos on as well. But yeah, opening the floor to everybody here.
Can I just add one thing? Super clear. I think it's important as well as you're kind of doing these healing circles to not take anything personally. So the reason why I say this is because, as an example, the Circle by the Sea, we actually had 2 sold out events, which was really good to have the letter, I mean. But not everyone attended. So sometimes you could feel like that it's quite disheartening like that. So you kind of have to, before you go in, you set the intention that, okay, I'm doing this and we're putting it out there for those who, you know, there is space for whoever needs to join. But what happens after that is beyond you, if that makes sense. And obviously after that happens, you reflect, how could we get more? How could we keep that sustainable? But don't take it personally as you go. Because I know obviously everyone in this field has a very beautiful heart and, you know, wants to help people, which is fantastic. But if you know, if it doesn't meet the expectations that you, or these, you know, high hopes of what you wanted, then that's it's okay. You will be okay. Just do it again. It's fine. So important to mention.
Thanks, Basma. Guys, anyone have any ideas how on kind of moving forward in the current climate, how we can all stay connected or do something as a collective in rolling out these healing circles? Please feel free to share your ideas as well. Definitely open to that. We acknowledge also that what we're doing isn't the solution. It sits side by side with a lot of the fantastic work that is going on. But thank you some really generous comments. Feel free to unmute, ask questions.
I've in the Social Workers for Palestine group, Ziad, we are initiating wellbeing circles for social workers in that group. So if there's anyone in this meeting who is interested in joining the